My heart races in the dark as if it was still in that moment, that absurd interval between the warning and the blood on the floor. It's been months. I can still smell the rain mixed with metal. I can still see the blinking light on the screen, the blocked number. I can still hear that voice, low, emotionless. The strangest thing wasn't the crime. I've seen crimes up close for over 20 years. What destroyed me was time. 30 seconds. It minutes, it wasn't the day before, it wasn't a last-minute clue. It was before. That's all. Before. Sometimes I think maybe I was being tested or punished. There are nights when I'm sure someone wanted me to witness it, not to stop it, but to carry the memory. My body reacted before my mind, a cold sweat running down my back, my throat dry, as if something had caught between my stomach and chest. I just listened, and when the call ended, the world seemed to go silent, but it was only for a few seconds before chaos broke out. Since I have returned to that day 1,000 times, I returned even without wanting to. I returned as I am returning now, without choice. I wasn't on duty, and yet I was the first to know that someone was going to die. There are people who believe that when we move away from it, also moves away from us. But I learned too late that there are certain things that stuck to your skin. Even when you try to wash them off, burn them off, forget them. They're still there, staring back at you in the mirror. I didn't leave the police force because I wanted to. It wasn't exactly because I couldn't take it. It was like a silent implosion. No one saw it. But inside, everything had already collapsed. I spent 20 years dealing with scenes that no one should see. Dark houses at 3 a.m. The smell of dried blood mixed with cheap mothers screaming the names of their children who no longer responded. I pretended it was just another day. Report, another bulletin, but it wasn't, it never was, and the body, it doesn't forget. What really broke me wasn't the last incident. It was what after it. The silence, the sound of the kitchen clock at 5 a.m, ticking by, the absence of adrenaline, of the radio blaring in the car, the absence of the anger that drove me. When you live with chaos for too long, starts to feel sick. Early in my retirement, I tried to maintain a routine, walking, drinking strong coffee, reading the newspaper. But it all felt as if I were playing someone trying to be normal. My mind wouldn't turn off. I still dreamed of old scenes. Some were real. Others faces, voices, details that didn't exist. Sometimes I woke up sweating, breathing unevenly, not knowing if I had fallen asleep or if I had just for too long. It was at this stage that the connections began. At first, I thought it was a muffled voices, people breathing heavily on the other end of the line, and then the click-dry sound of someone hanging up. Once, 5 times, always at random times, 3 a.m, noon, 8:42 at night, no pattern, no logic, but with a disturbing constancy, as if was trying to remember that I was still being watched. I tried to track it down. I called friends from my old team. No numbers were registered. Calls came from different region codes, but the characteristics were always the same. Tinny voice, slight interference, and a thick silence, almost as the person on the other end was waiting for me to say something. I never did. One night, I spent 46 minutes with line open, hearing nothing. Sometimes the sound of breathing, other times a constant hissing. Like a badly tuned, I should have hung up, but I couldn't. It was as if I expected the voice to say my name at some point. Or worse, something only I understand. My ex-wife used to say it was paranoia. You're looking for a new fling because you can't live without it. She was right. Maybe I had become addicted to the tension, the urgency, or maybe knew deep down that it wasn't for nothing. But there was one specific day that unhinged me more than any crime scene in my entire career. It was my daughter's birthday. I was home alone, looking at an old photo of her, about 5 years old, with messy hair and cake stains on her face. I had had one drink too many. My cell phone rang, hidden number, nothing new. I answered angrily, ready to swear, but nothing came out of my mouth. On other side, a distorted voice whispered, "He never fell off the bridge. They lied to you." The line is down. My body froze. My hands felt sweaty, stone cold. The name that wasn't said was the one that didn't need to be said. Only one person had fallen off the bridge in all my years of it. Wasn't an accident. At least, that's not what I believed at the time. The case was a suicide, a 17-year-old boy with no record, no family nearby. The expert report indicated no struggle, no direct witnesses. The report, I signed the report, I buried the doubt, or I thought I had buried it, but that sentence, said with such calm, there was no way it'd be a coincidence. That night I didn't sleep. I paced around the house from the kitchen to the bedroom, the living room to the bathroom. The silence seemed greater than usual, almost as if the air itself was trying to alert me to something. With every cast by the streetlight, I jumped inside. With every noise from the plumbing, my heart raced. I dug through the old files. I still had a copy of the case report, tucked away in a box, along with newspaper clippings and scribbled notes. I began to reread it with eyes that no longer the same. Details that had once seemed trivial now became suspicious. Vague phrases, subtle photographs at odd angles, a constant absence of names, of voices. That call reopened something in me that I didn't want to revisit. Something anger and regret, because part of me knew I could have investigated more at the time. I could have persisted, but the pressure was on. They wanted the case closed, and I was tired, I was resigned, but now there was someone on the other end of the line saying that it was all a lie. Worst of all, they seemed to know that it was still eating away at me inside. Over the next few days, I received more calls. Some said nothing. Others little random phrases like breadcrumbs left to guide me back to something. You let it go. Back to the entrance camera. The one no one saw. Looked back before he fell. Each sentence was a knife slowly sinking in. I started having nightmares again. In the mirror, I seeing someone I didn't recognize. Dark circles under my eyes, stubble, eyes that avoided contact. I became a shadow inside my own home. I ate, spoke even less. I only thought. I only relived. I only listened. I started recording the connections. I set up an amateur tracking scheme with help of a retired colleague who now worked in digital security. But the numbers were still clean. The voices always masked, as if whoever was behind it knew exactly what they were doing. Sometimes I thought it might be someone mocking me, someone access to old records, trying to play with my guilt. But the way the sentences were said, the details that only someone involved could know, destroyed me. It wasn't mockery, it was a warning, it was a demand. And it's weird to say this now, but a part of me started wanting more. Wanting the call, wanting more pieces of that puzzle that maybe I never really put together, like I needed it to keep breathing. Maybe that's why I hesitate when the phone rang that time. That day, I didn't feel fear, I felt preparedness. But what happened next made me everything. Everything I thought I knew about research, about trust, about time. Because when that voice whispered thee of the street, and the exact second, I understood that what was haunting me was not just a mistake from the it was something much bigger and closer than I wanted to believe. Have you had the feeling that someone is watching you, but that this someone knows everything about you? What I discovered after that call doesn't sense to me to this day, and the more I tried to understand, the more the pieces seemed to fit together they never should have been. What comes next is not easy to tell, but it is real, and it will shake up you believe about coincidence or destiny. Like the video and subscribe to the channel, because from here on, the story only downhill and in the dark. Here each story hides more than it seems. Each detail could be the key to something much bigger. And when think you've understood, the twist comes. If you like stories with buried secrets, real mysteries that no one has been able to explain, confessions that should never have been heard, this is the place for you. Every week, new cases, new uncomfortable truths coming to light. And I assure you, what comes after this story is even stranger than it seems. Every has little rituals, things we repeat without realizing it, as if they were there to keep the world going. That night started like that, just so many others, until the very second it stopped being that way. The TV was on low, just to fill the silence. The silence that isn't calm, it's hollow, the kind that seems to be waiting for something to happen. The couch already had the marks of my body being sunk there for so long, and the coffee mug forgotten on the coffee table shook slightly every time refrigerator's compressor kicked on. It was a silly sound, but at the time seemed too loud. The light came only from the lamp next to me, orange and tired. The news was showing images of a fire in a warehouse another state, but I wasn't paying attention, not really. My mind was going back and forth. I alternating between looking at the screen and staring at the faint reflection of the room in the window. It's strange. But sometimes I did this just see if anyone was watching me from the outside. Paranoia, maybe, or maybe it was instinct. The kind we develop after of seeing the worst in people. His breathing was heavy but calm until the moment his cell phone vibrated. 3 short screen lit up. Private number. My stomach turned over in a sudden rush, not because of the number that had become routine, but something that vibration, when it came, chilled me. I answered on the second ring. Hello? My voice came out hoarser than usual. Silence. A hiss, like a poorly insulated wire deep in the ear, and then the voice. The crime will happen on the corner of Henrique Diaz. Run! The call. There was no time to think or to doubt. I felt the blood drain from my face. My throat dried up in a second, and my heart the way it does when we are faced with something we don't understand, but know is serious, as if the body knew before the mind. I stood with the cell phone still pressed to my ear. I wanted to believe that I had heard wrong. Henrique Diaz. That street wasn't far. 4 blocks at but. What exactly was going to happen there? A robbery, an accident, an attack? Before I could think straight, the police radio. I still kept on even after retirement. An old habit, almost an addiction, began to crackle. Muffled voice, code 290, stabbing, Henry Diaz. I remember to my feet, but my body seemed slower than my thoughts. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair, slipped my feet into my sneakers, left. I didn't even grab my wallet or my door keys, just my cell phone in my pocket, just fear in my ribs. The street was cold, covered in a fine, as if the entire city had held its breath. I walked quickly, almost running. The streetlights flickered in places, and the of distant cars cut through the dawn like blades. The air smelled damp, heavy with that indefinable scent of earth, smoke, and abandonment. I reached the corner of Henrique Diaz. The red and blue lights were already spinning, reflecting off the walls, the windows, the pale faces of the peering out from their balconies. The police were forming a perimeter, a body on the ground, covered with a grey blanket. A dark spread across the cement. I stopped a few meters away. My breath was shallow, my hands were cold. I watched everything, as if I were watching a tape being rewound before my eyes. I saw the movement, the protocol, the isolation. I saw a young police filling out the initial information on a clipboard. I saw the ambulance standing still, useless. I saw death, cold, simple. And inside me, a knot, because 30 seconds before I knew. I don't know how long I stood there. One of the officers recognized me. He came over me and lowered his tone. You shouldn't be here. I know. How did you find out? I opened my mouth, but I couldn't answer. Because they called me, didn't explain anything. Not even to me. He looked at me for a second longer as if he wanted to insist, but he gave up. He backed to the group, and I stayed. The scene was clean, technical, but there was something that didn't fit. The position of the body. Direction of the blows, the lack of signs of a struggle. The victim was wearing a backpack, simple clothes. He looked like a student or a worker from his shift. I moved a little closer, close enough to smell the metallic scent of blood, still fresh. I had to fight back the urge to myself, not because of the sight I'd seen that before, but because of the mixture of guilt and helplessness. It was as I'd been pulled back into a nightmare from which I'd never truly woken. On the way home, the footsteps seemed to echo on the wet sidewalk. Shadows seemed to want to say something. Every distant sound seemed like a muffled voice trying to reach my consciousness. And the question that kept me was simple, direct, and impossible. Who called me? Because the person knew where, knew when, knew what. And he me, but too late. Lying in bed, I couldn't close my eyes. I just stared at the ceiling, dark and still. My cell phone rested on the table next to me as if it were waiting to ring again. My chest burned, my mind throbbed. That morning, I understood that separates what is past and what is still happening is much thinner than it seems, and that there are truths that refuse to be buried. They come back in different ways, by different means, but they come back. The voice on the phone, intonation. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded sad, like someone telling something inevitable, like someone mourning before the end. It ate me. It turned me inside out, and it made me wonder, was that a warning or a test? I still don't know the answer. But deep down, I think some of me already had a feeling that that call wouldn't be the last. There, lying in the dark, with the smell of the night still clinging to skin, and the image of that body in my eyes, I could only think of one thing. Whoever was calling, done yet. There are things we try to forget, but they wait quietly in the same place where we left them. Until the right time I came home that night, with my face freezing and the back of my neck throbbing. It felt like having a fever and being cold at the same time. I didn't shower, I didn't take off my clothes. I sat on the couch, the same way I'd come in, stared at my phone. The screen was still lit with the last call, or rather the space where it had been. It should to be. Nothing. No history, no number. A call log, like I made it all up. The first thing I thought was that maybe I was freaking out, that my mind, already broken by so many years of burden, created that as a form of punishment for everything I had let go. But it wasn't an invention. I knew the tone of that voice. I felt the panic that I make up, and most importantly, I recognized that street, Henry Diaz, the scene of my last open case. The exact same spot 5 years earlier. A girl had disappeared without a trace. Maria Eduarda, 16 years old, in school uniform, walking between the stop and her house. She was never seen again. No trace, no useful camera, no screams heard. The case consumed me. It destroyed me, and it was the beginning of my end within the corporation. But the detail that made me freeze inside that morning was not just of the address. It was the spot where the victim fell. The same spot. The same shadow cast by the old lamppost that was never replaced. The same cracked wall with the graffiti half erased. There was no way it'd be a coincidence. And that was what took me out of my apathy. I already knew the pain, the emptiness too. But this connection, provocation, pushed me to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Investigate. The next day, early in the morning, I went to the old police, not as a detective, as a visitor. But the faces were familiar. Some were as tired as I was. Others were too young to what I was doing there with my sunken eyes and unshaven beard. The first person to welcome me was Jefferson, an old partner, in a leadership position. "I thought you were gone for good, man," he said with that tone between relief and caution. "I thought so too," I replied, to force a half-smile that didn't come. I said it straight out. What happened on Henrique Diaz was no coincidence. And the call I received could not ignored. He frowned, leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "Did you just get that call?" I nodded. And his sentence pierced me. "So we don't have any calls. It doesn't appear in the system. No police report was filed before the crime. No complaint filed at the center, nothing." I explained that the call came directly to my cell phone. Hidden number, distorted voice. And that it from the history. He was quiet for a few seconds. looking at me in the way that an experienced police officer looks when he doesn't know you're seeing something real, or sinking into a fit that all too real. You want to reopen the girl's case, is that it? I don't want anything official yet. I want access to the from Henrique Diaz. Cameras from the last few days, that's all. He hesitated, but he agreed. You have until tomorrow. After this, material will be sent to the experts for the current case. They got the files from a nervous intern who didn't seem to understand why an old would mess with something that was no longer his business. I took home. I copied it to a hard drive. I opened it on the computer in the room. The images were from the camera of a hardware store on the opposite. The image was raw, without sound, in color, but washed out. You could see the part of the sidewalk, and in the background, the shadow of the lamppost. In the first video, from 11 p.m. to 11:45 p.m., seemed calm, one or two cars, no strange movements, but at 11:28 p.m., the recording cuts out. Black screen, 4 minutes of emptiness. When it comes, it's already 11:32 p.m., the exact interval between the call and the crime. My body froze. I watched it again, pausing, rewinding, until I noticed something I had missed the first time. In the lower right corner, almost out of the frame, a figure, a man, standing still. Then slowly, as if he didn't want to be seen, but as if he already knew where to stop and when. The victim appears 20 seconds later. Walking headphones in, head down. The man moves, the image freezes, and he comes back with the victim on the floor. And the man, gone. My heart was so hard it hurt. There was something even more wrong about this, something that screamed without sound. I picked up the phone and called old contact Camilla, a forensic technician who had always been more curious than her bosses liked. I asked her to analyze the integrity of the file. Hours later, she called me. Someone manually turned off the camera's physical 2 minutes before the crime. They reactivated it shortly after. It was intentional. And I sat down. I didn't say anything. There's more, she continued. The camera caught a brief interference in the signal just before the cut. External, like a portable jammer. The breath came out in bits, so it wasn't just coincidence. It was execution, and with precision. In the following, I went to Henrique Diaz Street twice, just observing. People passed by quickly, almost no one noticed the details, but I saw them. Corner, every streetlight, every reflection in the windows of the old apartments. The smell of the place was the same as it had been years ago. Dust mold, dampness from poorly maintained concrete. A lady, a long-time resident, recognized me. You were the police officer on the girl's case. You? I nodded. She came closer, lowered her voice. Remember back then I said I heard a strange noise that night? I remember. That's right. Before that boy died, I heard it again, the same sound, like a whistle, but electronic, too loud to be natural. And then, silence. Exactly, the ground seemed to shake beneath my feet, but it wasn't the ground, it was me. I went home and began to reread the records of the girls. My stomach churned with each line I had written. I was overcome by a mixture of shame and how had I not seen it? How had I accepted it so easily? One thing was clear, someone was picking up old stories that I had helped bury, but now it seemed that someone was leaving a trail, one that was only to me, and the strangest thing, I felt like this person wanted to be discovered. The truth doesn't come in shouts, it comes whispered, cold, unhurried, like a knife that touches before cutting, and when you realize, you've bled. 2 days after the Henrique Diaz scene, I was still digesting the images, the files, the silences. My body was trying to sleep, but my insisted on keeping everything spinning. The interference in the cameras, the figure, the lack of recordings, the electronic noise that the heard, and that now echoed inside me like an invented but painfully present memory. I avoided going out. The police was on all the time, part addiction, part alert, and the phone was like an animal sleeping on the table. It didn't ring. But presence kept watch over me. That morning I was already awake before the sun rose. Black coffee, stale cigarette, lost gaze. Deep down, I knew. Would come. Because when you break one layer of the lie, the others don't last long. And whoever started calling me hadn't finished. It was at that the phone vibrated. The same ringtone, the same screen, private number. I answered. I said nothing. On the other side, the same voice, short, without emotion, as if reading something inevitable. She's next. Rivas Bakery, 12:13. Click, end. What happened next was pure. I don't even remember putting on my sneakers. I just remember the zipper on my jacket closing and the door slamming behind Rivas Bakery. It's downtown, near the street where, years ago, I followed false lead in a case that was later shelved without warning. On the way, the traffic seemed too slow. Every traffic light was an insult. Pedestrian was an obstacle. I kept looking at my watch. 12:04, 12:07, 12:10. I arrived at 12:12. The bakery window showed cakes behind fogged glass. Tables were occupied. A man in a dress shirt, a woman reading the newspaper, and a young woman in a grey sweatshirt, headphones in, playing with her phone. I looked around reflexively. No unusual movement, no visible threat. And then, at 12:13 p.m. nailed, he entered. Black t-shirt, backpack on his back. He walked up to the girl in the sweatshirt as if he were greeting a friend, but instead, he took something out of his quick shiny, a box cutter. She barely had time to turn her face. He struck her shoulder with a sharp blow, as if to not as if to kill. The bakery froze. I stepped forward. He looked at me for a second and smiled, I swear. A short, satisfied smile. Then he dodged the customers, kicked the door shut, and disappeared down the street as if he already knew the escape route by heart. The girl in pain. Blood trickled down the sleeve of her sweatshirt, but it didn't look deep. It was a deliberate blow. A warning, or a signature. I him for half a block, but he turned into an alley and disappeared like smoke. When I turned back, the police were already arriving. From that point, it was no longer possible to be invisible. 2 cases, 2 alerts, 2 crime scenes with my name floating around in the background. They approached me at the scene. They wanted to know why I was there, how I knew, what I saw. This time the excuse of chance wouldn't fly. I took a breath. I told him I'd received an anonymous call. I gave him the details, the time, the warning, the exact content of the message. And for first time in years, I found myself sitting on the other side of the line of fire, not as a detective, but as a loose piece in a dangerous... "Can you prove that you received this call?" asked the officer on duty. I shook my head. Again, nothing on the no records, no history. It was as if the phone had been tampered with before I even answered. The woman was taken to the hospital. She a superficial cut. She was scared. She didn't know the attacker. She said she only looked at him when he was leaving, and even then. She also his smile. The word smile kept hammering away in my head. It was an out-of-place gesture. A psychological trace that didn't fit in with the later as I mentally replayed every second of that scene. Something struck me. The way he held the angle, the position of his body, the calm. He was not an amateur, and it wasn't an attempted murder either. It was as if he was saying, "I'm in control, you're too late." And the voice on the line, as always, knew exactly what and when. That night, I had a visit from 2 investigators. They said it wasn't an official summons. They wanted to talk. They asked if I was involved with the victim. They said the camera store next to the bakery had suffered an electrical short 2 minutes before the attack, the same as the other case. "Of course not. You are either being manipulated or taking part in this without realizing it," one of them said. "Or worse," added the other, he doesn't know what's going on." They both had reason to be suspicious, and I had no way to prove anything. The truth that lived inside me, that it was no longer enough, not even for myself. After they left, I sat in the dark. Leaning against the living room, the phone was next to me. silent. I felt angry, not just at the attacker, not just at the police, but at myself. For being in this maze again, where each step takes you further away from the exit. But there was still something that no one knew. Something didn't tell you, something I was told as he ran past me, something he whispered, and that I'm still not sure I want to remember. There are days when the pain doesn't warn you, it just comes back, and when it does, it doesn't knock on the door. It breaks it down. It comes in without permission and forces you to sit in front of the past as if it were a broken mirror. That's exactly how it was that morning. I've been losing sleep for days. Since the second attack, the house seemed smaller, more stuffy. Every wall was filled with silence and silence. For who know the shadow of what is unsaid is the loudest sound there is. The police were already looking at me differently. From a former colleague, had become an uncomfortable variable, a character outside the script. And to be honest, I didn't know exactly where I was standing anymore. The phone, the crimes, the absurd precision of each piece of information, the total lack of concrete evidence. Up until that point, I had been being now. Something inside me began to pull. It was a name, simple, flashing across the screen of a spreadsheet that one of the left opened during a deposition. A silly mistake, a reflex, but I saw it. And in that name, memory stuck like a splinter. Bruno Vasconcelos, the first victim of the sequence, the boy from Henrique Diaz. The name took me straight to a drawer I opened in 6 years, not literally, a mental drawer. A folder I'd thrown to the back of my mind so I wouldn't about it again, but it was always there. Bruno was one of the names mentioned in a case that cost me my uniform. The kind of incident that seems simple on paper but ruins everything in a 17-year-old teenager found dead in a vacant lot with signs of an overdose. Signs of violence, no history of addiction, and officially no crime. It was archived in less than 2 months. Cause of death: cardiorespiratory due to consumption of illicit substance. But I remember the smell of the place where they found the broken watch on his wrist, his sneakers tied on only one side. I remember his mother saying he didn't do drugs, that he was quiet, intelligent. I remember his father, or rather, I remember that heat after the burial. They said it was morning, that the man freaked out and ran away from the trauma. But not a visit to not a phone call, nothing. I went back to the old paperwork. I buried myself in it like someone returning to the scene of a looking for something left. And that's when the truth began to emerge. Little by from the margins, the recent victims, Bruno, the young woman from the bakery, and 2 other names that the press ignored, had something in. They were all present, directly or indirectly, in the investigation into the death of Costa, the teenager in the overdose case. Bruno, according to an anonymous complaint filed without, had sold a pill to the boy days before his death. There was never any proof, just a rumor. The girl, the bakery, was a monitor for an NGO that provided tutoring services in Felipe's neighborhood. She had told his mother at the time that he to be afraid of someone. Another name mentioned in an incident that same week was that of a supermarket. Security guard, the last person to see the boy alive, supposedly leaving the store with an energy drink and a packet of biscuits. Details. People in secondary notes, but now everyone was under attack, precise, targeted, and the most shocking thing, the dead boy's father. Gilberto had disappeared on the exact day the official report was released, never seen again. No record of escape, bank transfer, not even digital. At the time I thought he had gone mad with grief. Now I wasn't so sure anymore, because the style of the attacks, quick, clean, no real attempt to kill, but with an emotional impact, carried a specific type of motivation, personal justice, or revenge. What if Gilberto was? What if, all these years, he was somewhere collecting names? Anger began to take shape inside me, not just for the current but for the omission, for everything we ignored, for everything I accepted. At that time I had doubts, but I didn't press. I overwhelmed, tired. A prosecutor wanted quick results. The department was embroiled in other scandals. The boss wanted close, not understand. And me obeyed. I swallowed hard. I signed a report that I knew didn't explain anything, and now someone was taking the price for it. I looked at one of last photos from the investigation 6 years ago. It was the boy's face. His eyes were open, strangely calm. His body was stretched among plastic bags and dry leaves, an image that should have hurt. But that night, what hurt the most was remembering the I had when I wrote no signs of crime. It was a lie, and I knew, little by little. The dots began to connect cruel force. The anonymous caller knew everything because the person on the other side was too close to the pain. Someone had seen the case fall apart. Someone who knew where everyone involved was. Someone with access, with patience, and now with a plan. The folder shut. I looked at the phone. For the first time I wished it would ring, that the voice would say more, that it would give me time. That all. Time. But that's not how these stories work, right? When the truth decides to return, it doesn't ask for passage. She comes. What about you? You ever ignored something that you knew deserved more attention and then regretted it too late? There are truths that don't appear on tests. They're hidden between the lines, in the way someone looks away, in the silence after a simple question. I learned this from the worst cases. And also the best friends. That night, after I had gathered names, crossed off dates, reviewed files, and revisited everything I had ignored 6 years, I did not sleep. My mind was racing, connecting invisible threads, pulling up old memories as if they knew evidence. What bothered me most was not the coldness of the attacks, it was the clarity, the organization. That each move seemed part of a puzzle, and that I, even though I was off the board, was being guided by someone who knew exactly where to place. That's when I decided to do something I should have done sooner. Track connections. With help of a friend from the days when technology still had to be forced to obey, I activated a reverse tracking system, something that officially be working outside the corporate perimeter, but some tools stay with us, especially the ones that leave no trace. I wasn't expecting much. They had done a good job hiding the numbers, erasing history, scrambling signals, but what I found wasn't what I expected. The last call I won from the bakery was made using a public Wi-Fi connection. Nothing so strange, until I noticed the detail that made me freeze in of the screen. The hammock used was from the cafe that was 50 meters away, Central Police Station. Same cafe where the on-call team usually has their first coffee of the day. The same cafe where many officers go to switch off a little after work. Someone familiar with that environment would risk using a network so close by, because no one would suspect anything. It was there that an old penny Joe Marcello, former colleague, former patrol partner, a quiet, methodical, almost invisible guy. He worked for years the administrative department of the police station. After a knee injury, kept him off the streets. He had access to internal archived case files, and most importantly, time. Time to read, to observe, and to hold resentment. His name didn't appear anything recent, but I remembered one detail. João was the brother of Felipe Costa, the boy in the overdose case. No one knew. If they did, they never connected the dots. It was one of those relationships he avoided talking about. He never talked about his brother. He never about his grief. He never asked to be away. He just kept quiet. And now, after everything that was happening, this silence was making too noise. I went to see him late in the afternoon. I didn't warn him. I didn't send a message. I showed up at the old where he still lived with his mother, a woman of few words and worn eyes. He opened the door himself. He was wearing a faded shirt and had an expression of someone who was no longer surprised by anything. "I thought it would take longer," he said. I could even speak. We went in. The house had the same smell as always. Old books, stale coffee, and the mustiness of an old cabinet. We were silent a few seconds, then I got straight to the point. Was it you, the calls? He didn't deny it, he just sat down. I thought you were the one who might understand, he said quietly, but you gave up. I was forced to stop, I replied. There was too much stuff over it. Everyone has an excuse. His anger wasn't new, but now it was clear. It wasn't just against the system. It was me against the fact that I had let the case die. Felipe never used any drugs. He was used, a mule without knowing it. Someone put in his backpack after class. He started to feel sick, panicked. He tried to run. He thought he was going to be arrested. He had a fit. Died of suffocation. He stopped. And you wrote accident. The throat got stuck. How did you find out about this? I read everything. The ignored testimonies, the images that no one asked for. Bruno's mother laughed when I came to her and said that my brother had died because he said that he was just another dead addict. It's part of the life of those who live wrong. Those were her words. His face was too calm, a kind of calm that doesn't come from peace. It comes from decision. So started attacking, not to kill, just to mark, to show that no one has forgotten. That there are people who paid inside and will never go back being the way they were. I thought about everything. How close this had come to becoming major tragedy, the risk he was taking, and the fine line between justice and obsession. And why did you involve? He looked at me with something between disappointment and relief. Because I needed someone who had seen it all and still guilty, and because only someone like you could understand what I was doing. And not report right away. His cell phone was on the table. He opened an app. It showed the list of calls he had made, all at the exact time. All with next to them, who, where, why. It was a dossier, personal, surgical. What now? I asked. He looked at me. It took him a while to answer. I wait to see what happens. I've already done what I had to do. What you're going to do is up to you. I stood there for a few more minutes. About everything he said, everything I didn't say. At the door, before leaving, he said, "Do you remember the school camera tape?" Absent. There's a missing. There always has been, that part. I got it. I didn't ask how or why. I just knew that from that point on, what I thought I was about to change. There are people who think that justice is black and white, that you're either right or wrong. But in real, everything is stained. Stained with doubt, with silence, with pain held in for too long. And it was in this stain that I walked until the of this case. An end that never had a straight line, only a spiral. The days that followed that with João Marcelo were like walking through a minefield where all the bombs had already exploded. And yet, each step shook. I returned home carrying more than words. I carried confession, logic, motivation, and the kind of pain that doesn't fit into I spent hours reviewing his phone information, the calls, the times, the notes next to each. It was all there, surgical, rational, inevitable, a retaliation plan made by someone who didn't want to be a criminal, but also want to be forgotten. João didn't attack out of anger. He attacked with memory. What he did to me is clearer now. He used me. He put me in middle of the machine as an emotional piece, as a shield, as a distraction. Every phone call, every clue dropped. Every preview of it wasn't just a warning. It was a theater set up to put me as an indirect witness, to give me credibility, to confuse the and at the same time, to make me come back. I needed someone to reopen the truth, he said in one last meeting, before everything apart. And no one has more authority to do that than the person who wrote the lie. The sentence destroyed me inside. Because it's true, as much as I wanted to cling to the excuse that I did the best I could with what I was given, I knew there was a moment, a single I would have questioned more, confronted him head-on, torn up the report. But I chose the quickest path. Someone died because of it, or even worse, died in a way that became a statistic. His capture was clean, official, without resistance. He knew it was matter of time, and he accepted. They said he turned everything over. He showed the records, the evidence. Even the surveillance tapes the police department had lost. Everything was stored in encrypted backups with dates, times, and metadata preserved. Did more than the police themselves. And for that very reason, the case was reopened. Felipe Costa, 17 years old, who died of an overdose, was now treated as a victim of manslaughter, child abuse, and trafficking involving corrupt agents. 3 names were 2 were removed. 1 was arrested. John was right all along, but he also crossed the line. And I was in the middle. The day he was from the police station in handcuffs, he passed me in the hallway and said just one thing: "It's in your hands now." "As it always have been," I couldn't answer. Since then everything has been quieter, calmer, they say, but peace does not return the same. My name was in part of the trial, not as an accomplice, nor as a hero, just as an intermediate witness, a term that is too cold for someone who every piece of that story in his heart. The media didn't care much. They're already a new scandal in another sector, and the public gets distracted quickly. But for me, nothing happened, because deep down, that never left my head. Did he choose me because he trusted me, or because he knew I carried guilt too? I still live here. Same house, same sofa, same on in the living room. The phone is still there on the little table, and since that day he never played again. But when it's past 11 p.m., I at him, just to be sure. If this story made you think differently, if some part of it caught your attention, moved you or reminded you of something, it has already done its job. Because deep down, we share these confessions so that other people can also see sometimes goes unnoticed. Now, what you do with it is up to you. Like the video, to the channel and comment below the word blame. That's all. That way I know you've come this far, felt everything you needed to feel, and are for the next dive, because the next story goes even deeper. There's something in it that no one has ever told you before. And when you hear, you'll understand why some truths are buried out of fear, not lack of evidence. So keep watching. The next story is already waiting for you on the screen, and it will move you in a way that this one didn't even come to.